Hello everyone, welcome to the presentations of Elimin8hate campaign, multimedia campaign to transform anti-Asian racist incidents with Barbara Lee and Elimin8hate at the second National Asian Heritage Symposium. Before we start, we want to acknowledge, so many of us are settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcefully brought to the lands where you are now, or you are indigenous and not indigenous to the territory where you are now. So regardless of who you are, we pay respect and recognize the original custodian of the lands where we are. So out of the respect for the rights of indigenous people, it's our collective responsibility to critically interrogate the colonial histories and present day implication of this. So the work that we do on behalf of the festival like SASI is from the perspective of honoring, protecting, and sustaining this land and its people who were first on this territory. We strive to go beyond just acknowledging the lands and with indigenous knowledge, share principles, and invite you to move beyond an acknowledgement and into the doing. So my name is Carrie-Anne, so I will be your moderator for these presentations. And I want to introduce you to Barbara Lee, is the founder and president of the Vancouver Asian Film Festival, the longest running Asian film festival in Canada, and will celebrate 25 years in 2021, so next year. So one of VFF core values is that representation is the most effective tools to combat racism. And also I want to introduce you to Elimin8hate, is co-founder of Project 1907, as grassroots group made up of Asian women that aims to elevate Asian voices that are underrepresented and undervalued in mainstream political, social, and cultural discourses, including amplifying the voices of women. Our work is led entirely by volunteers community organizers. So I pass to Elimin8hate now.
Thank you, Carrie-Anne. I want to add to the acknowledgement that VAF exists, works, and is allowed to play on the unceded land and territories of the Coast Salish peoples, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Stolo and Musqueam nations in Vancouver. So I would like to pass it on. The first part of this presentation is going to be done by Elimin8hate from Project 1907 to talk about some of the racism reporting, self-reporting that they have collected over since January. So what happened was Elimin8hate, VAF launched Elimin8hate in early April, and Project 1907 started their reporting collection a little earlier than us, and we collaborated with them and through our Elimin8hate campaign. So I will pass it on to Ellen.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time and for your participation today. As mentioned, my name is Ellen. I'm a co-founder and organizer with Project 1907. Before sharing about our work, I also want to acknowledge the land that I'm on. I am very grateful to learn, live, and work on the unceded, ancestral, stolen territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. The work of Project 1907 also happens on these territories. And I would invite you to share in the chat box, if you can, which territory you're joining from. If it's something that you're not sure about, or maybe you're not sure of the spelling, you can take a look at nativeland.ca. That's native-land.ca. I also want to take a second to contextualize where we are in space and time. We're in the midst of a global awakening to white supremacy. And so in this conversation about anti-Asian racism, I want to acknowledge the significant amount of labor by Black and Indigenous people, particularly Black and Indigenous women, that has even made it possible for us to have this conversation. And I also need to acknowledge how racism impacts these groups disproportionately. And that's important to remember as we have this conversation. So we founded Project 1907 as a response to the significantly increased level of racism and hate we were experiencing as Asian women. The name of the project refers to the 1907 anti-Asian riots in Vancouver. And we aim to draw on and reframe those histories in our work. So a quick background on the riots, if you have not heard of them. They were an anti-immigration rally led by white supremacists, which led to 3 days of vandalism, violence, and rioting in Vancouver, in Chinatown and Japantown. And this also marked the start of a number of racist federal policies that targeted and excluded Asian people. So we're talking about the Opium Act, the Continuous Journey Act, the Dominion Elections Act, and of course this eventually also led to the Chinese Exclusion Act. So we know that anti-Asian racism is part of the fabric of Canada and how Canada has come to be. And yet our experience is that it is never quite viewed with credibility or taken seriously. So with COVID-19 and the scapegoating of Chinese people and East Asian people for the virus, we saw a gap in terms of people or organizations tracking what was going on. And as organizers, we were experiencing a significantly increased level of hate and racist incidents and did not have anywhere to share this information. We know that police reports are not accurate. We know that people are not able to report to the police for a number of reasons. And we also know that increased policing is not a solution. So we developed a community-based alternative for people to report anonymously. It's available in a number of languages. You can check it out at elimin8hate.org. We can drop the link. Maybe Barb can do that while I chat. And so we've partnered with VAF on this campaign to just get an idea of what is happening to who and where. So we have brought our data together with a number of other organizations in Canada where we were hoping to provide a national picture of what's going on. So I'll just ask Carrie-Anne to bring up the infographic now, please. We released this information just on Wednesday on the anniversary of the anti-Asian riots. And it's a compilation of over 600 reports of anti-Asian racism that were submitted to us at Elimin8hate, as well as covidracism.ca, which is a similar initiative put on by some groups in Ontario. It's the Chinese Canadian National Council, the Toronto chapter, as well as the Social Justice chapter. So here what you see is a summary of an analysis of data. So noteworthy point, over 600 incidents were reported to us. Nearly 30% of incidents are classified as assault. So primarily coughing, spitting, physical violence, and physical assaults. And this represents a 50% increase since the release of our first set of data earlier this year. Women continue to be disproportionately impacted by these incidents. In Canada, they report 60% of all incidents, and in BC, this is actually higher, almost 70%. Verbal harassment is extreme. Name calling, racial slurs, foul and derogatory language is included in 65% of all reported incidents. And again, this is higher in BC. And yeah, maybe if you scroll down a bit, you can see this is also available on our website and on our social media. So you can see the breakdown by racial category, location. Something very interesting to note is that the majority of these incidents are taking place in public spaces where witnesses are around. So that begs the question of the role of society and the role as our role as community members in how we're combating this issue. And the other thing to note is that when the analysis is done on a per capita basis, Canada has more reported incidents of anti-Asian racism than the United States. So you know, as Canadians, it's common, we always turn to the US and kind of give ourselves a pat on the back and say, well, at least we're not as bad as them. And this argument is not holding up any longer. So when we took a look at the data by subnational region, so province, territory, or state, BC had the highest number of reported incidents of any province, state, or territory in North America. This was followed by California, New York, and Ontario. So this is a significant problem. Community source data is crucial. And what we're trying to say with this information is that racism is not caused by one or two bad apples. These are not isolated incidents, and these attacks are just symptoms of an institutional problem. So, you know, part of the impact of the label of the model minority being placed on Asian, particularly East Asian people, is erasure. So I want to ask, what is the purpose and effect of erasing our experiences? Asian people should not be gaslighted again and again, or be forced to relive our traumas again and again, simply to prove that anti-Asian racism exists in this country. So that is part of what we're trying to say. Part of what we're also trying to understand is how Asian people actually experience racism. So we know that Black and Indigenous people experience very specific types of institutional racism, and Asian people experience white supremacy in a different way. So we're trying to deconstruct and understand what is going on in our communities, and get some data to support our experiences. And we're calling on the federal government to create an anti-racism strategy in their post-pandemic recovery plan. That needs to be at the center of our post-pandemic recovery plan. So that's just a very quick overview of our most recent data. Excuse me, I'll turn it over to Barb, and feel free to drop your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to those a little later. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Ellen. So as I said, Vancouver, and as Karian introduced, Vancouver Asian Film Festival is the longest running Asian film festival in Canada. We started organizing in 1995, and our first film festival was held in 1997. We will be celebrating 25 years next year. And one of the founding principles of VAF is that in order to combat racism and stereotypes, we need to be seen and heard. We need to have the access and the ability to tell our own stories using an authentic voice. So and why is that so important? Ellen alluded to this, is the idea of erasure. So that is very important when we talk about representation. So I'll just wait for the slide. So the way most people are consuming information nowadays is not just so much through books, but really through media, film, television, and the images that are being seen and heard and portrayed either even in commercials, television shows, podcasts, the way that people of color, Black and Indigenous people are being represented is informing and educating the greater communities of what our lived experiences are like. And if we don't tell those stories ourselves, then we're relying on people to put our lived experience through a white lens, which we do not want to do. So what VAF has done is we have had many different projects. One of them is the Mighty Asian Movie Making Competition, which we help empower filmmakers, emerging filmmakers, to learn how to tell their own stories. We have workshops, diversity in filmmaking, that helps filmmakers access platforms in which they get to show their stories and the films that they've made. So why we partnered and why we felt it was very important to get these reports that Project 1907 has been collecting is that that is a source for some of the stories that are happening in our community. And then we want the storytellers and the artists like yourselves to be able to have access to gain an audience for your works. So as you can see on the first slide here, thank you, Karianne, I know it was difficult. I asked her to put it on because I was having some trouble as well. You can see the amount of hours that the average Canadian 18 plus watches of television and internet-based television every week. It is almost, so it's gone from 29 hours to probably about 30 hours, a little bit more than 30 hours over the years, and probably a lot more if you include streaming and all those types of consumption. So people's ideas are being formed. They're spending a lot of time in front of their screens. And if we don't have our access to put our own stories on those medium platforms, then we're being erased. We're not being heard. We're not, the way we are experiencing racism and work and living and playing in Canada is not being represented the way it should be represented. So I want to go to the next slide. So these are some of the reasons why I did a study. They are very, you can read them, and I will just talk briefly about them. There are communities in Canada that may not have a large community of color, and therefore some of their ideas and how they view communities of color is based on what they see on media, on film and television. Therefore, if we're not there, then they don't think that we exist, or they have very stereotypical ideas of how the communities actually are, or what we're about. So that's one point. The second one is by erasing us or putting us as the other, we are shown that our experiences and our lives don't matter, meaning that we're not valued, we're not participating in the greater Canadian society. The next one is that for young people coming up, if this is the type of images that they are seeing on a regular basis, this actually will affect their self-image, their self-esteem, and there are studies that have shown that very stereotypical images of the BIPOC community actually has negative effects on the mental health of the community, and especially for young people in this community. So it's really important to show realistic portrayals of people of color. Then I really wanted to say that we all have, as artists, we all have a responsibility, and we all need to work collectively to push the agenda for change, for access. I think that's a very big thing that we do in terms of our grant writing to get the funding to do the work that we want to do. I think the Symposium is a great place to start to make the connections, to have solidarity in our voices, to say that this is important, and to come together and work as a group, because us all working in silos has not been able to have the force to break down some of these barriers. And if we can all come together in our own discipline, we can actually do more to make these changes happen as we recover from the COVID pandemic. So I would like to end, we can talk about this because I think this is a lot of discussion. These are just very high level points about why representation is important, if not one of the most important tools to be used to address racism, anti-Asian racism in our particular case. So VAF is always about what can we do? We want to have calls to action. We want to have specific steps. So one of the things that we felt that we can do is to support the artists, to make the arts, and to have a platform and some financial support to help them produce, shoot, film their own stories. So I think the more stories that we share with one another, the greater social cohesion and the way that we can move forward on understanding and appreciating our diverse Asian cultures that we have in Canada. So we've launched a fund, which I would love Carrie Ann to play the video. And what we're doing is our one small way to help artists transform these negative attacks and these negative incidences into something positive and something artistic. Oh. There was actually music to go with that video.
Did you, it was working or not?
I didn't hear the music, but that's fine. I think people saw the visual, so.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. So we've launched a fund. It's a small fund of $10,000 for stories. We want people to pitch us, and we are going to continue to build on this fund to find stories to empower artists, to empower our communities, to be seen and heard. And next year being our anniversary year, there's going to be a lot more events and activities and ways to support the artists. So please check in at vaf.org over, in the new year, because we're going to be launching a lot more programs. So now I think I'd like to open it up. I think we've kind of touched on a lot of things. I'd love to have the audience questions. So let's see.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara, for your presentation. So if there is anybody have questions, I will check. So we have a question from Laetitia, Barbara. So Laetitia from Vancouver Asian Heritage Month Society. So what other actions along with the ones you mentioned before can the community promote and encourage Asian representation to eliminate hate? To eliminate hate.
Ellen, did you want to answer that one?
Sure, I can jump in. Something that I think it's a common question, what can I do? What actions can I take? I think it's twofold. The first is always, of course, political. And so who are you voting for? What actions are you taking in the political sphere that supports the uplifting and centering of racialized voices? On an individual level, I also always like to ask, who are you listening to? Who are you reading? Who are you watching? Who do you follow on social media? What kind of musicians do you listen to? I think these are all important questions to ask, and then actions to take. So I recently have made a much more concerted effort to read books by BIPOC authors. And I think this is a powerful way to learn more about representation, to learn more about the diversity of experiences, and also to encourage other people in your network to do the same.
Yes. So I would like to add to that, and that's something that VAF always encourages people to do, is to support the BIPOC communities and artists and to consume their art and their works, because often that is the response that we get from the funders and the gatekeepers, is that it's not good business But I believe that we are, and what we need to do is to support each other, and also look for opportunities. And also, if you are in a position where, we always say, like, if you're working on a mainstream film or television project, bring this up in your discussions. Make a point of opening the door for somebody else to come in, somebody else of color to come in, and do it's not your responsibility to educate, but to inform a little bit so that people can do their own education. A lot of times people, unfortunately, are so set in just getting something done, they don't really they don't even think about the bigger picture and what this means. So it's really important to, if you have the energy to have that, because I really want to be conscientious that there's a lot of responsibility that the BIPOC community shoulders in trying to educate everybody around them, and it's really not their job. But at the same time, if you can say what you have energy and space for, that these comments and these ways to inform is important, and to allow and help other artists and other people of color in through the door, because sometimes just getting in through the door is the hardest part. So we talk a lot about that. We talk about the advocacy work that we do. I am always talking to different government funding agencies about the importance of being seen and heard. Whatever realm that you work in, if it's political, then these are the discussions that have to be taken on. It's not something that is one and done. It's an ongoing process. It's not like a check mark, oh, I did my training, I'm good. It's an evolving, it's fluid, and we're all learning. I'm learning as well. I would say I don't have all the terms down pat. I don't know all the language. I am constantly reading, as Ellen says, and trying to inform myself, sorry. So sorry, I was just looking at the next question. It's from Sangeeta, and it says, the stats are alarming considering the comparison to the US. Are you planning to share these stats, and where to help create more awareness? Can we help with this? I definitely think everybody can help with this. I believe, Ellen, this was sent out to the media groups. We sent out to the media. Nobody's picked it up. Nobody's picked up the fact that BC has more anti-Asian racist incidences than New York and California. Maybe, Ellen, you can talk about what CCNC had response for the media.
I believe there were a few requests. So it hasn't been complete silence. It hasn't, I mean, the response has not been huge, that's for sure. So we have posted the stats on social media. So all of our handles are proj1907, PROJ 1907. So there's more stats there. You can help by sharing on your personal pages. You can help by spreading the word and having conversations about why this is happening with your family, with your friends. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and is actually also relevant here, is that there are several training opportunities, free training opportunities available. Hollaback has a free bystander intervention training on learning how to safely intervene, particularly in incidents of anti-Asian racism. And there's another organization called Impact Bay Area that has a course specifically for AAPI folks, so Asian identified folks, and gives us tools for how to protect ourselves when we're faced with these kinds of attacks. So getting the word out about these kinds of things, taking a training, preparing yourself, thinking about how I might intervene when I encounter an incident. Talking about the stats. I think all of these things are good steps. And yeah, if you have a platform or a large following, using your voice to share would be very helpful.
Mm-hmm. I would like to maybe ask all the participants, as I recognize some of the people here, is that I would like to put it out there. What are some of the things that you as an organization or you individually are doing to address anti-Asian racism in your community or just in your own sphere of influence? Like, what are some of the things that people are doing? Because part of this is to help share information and learn from each other.
We have also some comments in the chat that someone proposed a website, iolabac.org. So I think it's a great resources. If you can check it.
So Ellen mentioned iHolabac, which I did the bystander intervention training for, and they have actually more in-depth one. Also the impact one, I did the bystander training, personal safety, and there's one more that I wanted to do, which is the end of the month. So there are a lot of organizations, and they're doing them online, and they're free right now or by donation. So I would highly recommend that. I think part of what the Asian community historically has not been able to how would I say that? They're not as vocal, and they have not really advocated as much as they should have. And so that is one of the struggles, that how do we get the community to speak up? What kind of tools can we give them? And where do we go to find more information? So one of the things that I'm doing is I'm working on a workshop with the Simon Fraser University that is going to address the model minority myth. And what we're going to do is talk about how that myth has benefited the Asian community, but also harmed the Asian community. So I think when we were looking at facilitators, we were struggling with finding Asian Canadian facilitators to do the later half of the workshop. And there really weren't that many people that we came across that had that ability to facilitate an anti-Asian racism workshop. And we thought, that's part of the issue. We need to train people up to do this. We need to look into the community and help people get trained so that they can do the work. Because right now it's falling on the shoulders on a few, and they are exhausted. And we need to empower the community so that they can go out and do the work and do the training to get this awareness out there. I think Sangeeta said that she's been developing a play, We the Same, and planning workshops, public panel discussions, bringing artists and other organizations together, and she'd like to chat some more. Yes, we definitely will, so please reach out to VAF. One of the things that we do is we have many community partnerships, including with Letitia at the Vancouver Asian Heritage Month Society in Vancouver. We try to do partnerships, and again, sometimes it's just that we're so exhausted because we have so much on our plate that it's hard to put something else on. Another comment is, Bradley, we are building a hashtag Face Race campaign to document experiences of anti-Asian racism, and website to launch soon. Yes, so that's great, all these things. But what we don't want to do, we want to make sure that we're all working together. We don't want to have these silos, and that's something that at VAF we're very, very conscious of, that we want to make sure that we are all working together in some capacity, or we're at least talking to each other so that we have an awareness of what each other is doing, and that we don't want to be pitted against each other. And that seems to be a historical thing where different communities of color have been sort of put in positions where they're fighting against each other, where they're not moving the whole process forward. So we really want to help build everyone up and get this whole movement going together. Let's see what other things there are. We feature Pan-Asian performers, yes. So Manitoba, Holabac. Asian Heritage Society of Manitoba has a reporting tool on the website for anti-Asian incidents. So there are a lot of different reporting. As Ellen said, community reporting is very important. For many reasons, people are not feeling comfortable reporting to the police. But the second piece of the reporting is that it's a place for people to be heard and to feel that they can voice what happened to them without having to go through a formal police report. So what we want to do at VAF is to take these and show them that they're not alone. And by putting up these public service announcements that we have on our website and asking artists to come up with films and shorts about these experiences, that people will understand that there's other people that are in the same position as them, and that they can reach out to some of the resources that we post, and also Project 1907 posts on their website. There's a great number of resources and books on this title, on this subject. And, you know, we don't know everything. We're still learning and unlearning, as somebody said. So we would love to have people join us, work together on, and if you have an idea, then we would love to hear that. Should you write in your message? Okay. Great. Activist Theatre in Montreal. And I really like the Symposium's website. It was a wiki site that has a lot of artists posted on it and what they're doing. If we can update that so that we can all check in and see what's happening across Canada, that would be very helpful. Let's see, what else is there? Asian egg. I would love to maybe ask the attendees how, with all these different reporting sites, do you think that is it better to have one site and everybody pushes their people that go onto their reporting sites to this one national site? So I'm just sort of, I think yes. Ellen, maybe you can talk about working on a national campaign with different organizations across Canada.
Sure. Yeah, I think someone commented, I think local is good, then consolidate nationally. I guess that's the approach that we have been taking. So we are based in BC and have been collecting the majority of incidents in BC, then partnered with groups in Ontario who had most of the data for Ontario and kind of filled in the gaps between us. I think it would be great if there were either provincial reporting centers or a national reporting center that collects this information on an ongoing basis. I do think there is some value for the local aspect because the context does differ from province to province, especially in BC where there's such a high concentration of Asian people. The way that we experience racism is different. So I do think there is value to that as well. But we are, of course, open. I'm also very curious to hear what other people think.
So Karen Cho has said, would be better to have a national site, but people want to know what will be done with the reports, who will address complaints, and also important for the Asian community not to have to take on role expensive reporting tools and administration. So I want to point out that Project 1907 is all volunteers. We are all volunteers, so we have shouldered a lot of the work that has been done in the community. So did you want to address the question of who will address complaints and what will be done with the reports, if there's any follow-up plans?
Sure. So at the moment on our form, there is an option to leave your contact details if you want support with escalating your report and filing it as an official complaint. So if people want support reporting to the police, if they would like support with filing with the Canadian or BC Human Rights Commissions, we are offering that support for people who identify that way. And at the moment, our priority continues to be collecting reports. So we'll continue to partner with CCNCTO and CCNCSJ until next year to collect as much information as we can. There's very, very little data on this in Canada. So we want to get this information over an extended period of time, collect as much information as we can, and then really use the information that comes out to inform our next steps. So I think, so we're kind of waiting for what the data says to decide what we'll do next. We're already starting to see some pretty consistent patterns. So we'll continue to take a look at that. But the other thing to consider, I think part of the reason we collected this information is also for the community. So, this information is out there. It's what will you do with this information? If you're part of an organization, or if you're part of a community group, even if you're just an individual, like what one action can you take today that can take a step towards making an Asian person in your life maybe feel safer or feel supported. So we also wanted to make it public for people to take their own actions.
So one of the attendees said that Ning Alcutas said, it's difficult for people to feel safe. I know several Filipino Canadians who won't report even with encouragement from community. Do you have some suggestions for getting those stories reported or those incidents reported? Sorry, you're muted, Ellen.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were asking the person who asked the question.
Oh, no. And I was asking you I think you've had some people come and actually do the reports for them, or
oh, yes.
You can talk about that.
Yes, sorry, I can talk about that. Yeah, so we have had some people who are maybe not comfortable with the technology, or for whatever reason, the online form, of course, is a barrier to reporting. So we have had community members support with kind of filing the reports. So either checking in with the person who was targeted, having a chat about what happened to them, and then asking if you're able to submit it on their behalf. Having a phone call, or some people have also just sent me an email and let me know what's going on, and I've inputted the information on their behalf. So I know that there's a lot of stigma and challenges in our community around reporting. Even the ability to recognize when something racist is happening to you, I think that's something in our communities we need to kind of develop a muscle for and develop more language around. But if you know something that's happened to someone, if something comes up in a conversation, particularly with seniors, I really encourage you to just chat through the conversation with them and then ask if you can submit the report on their behalf. It's completely anonymous. We don't need to know their name. You can provide as much or as little information as you like, but it's really helpful for us to even know who's being impacted.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really important. And we helped with the translation. So the reporting, as Ellen said, it's in Vietnamese, Mandarin Cantonese, Korean, Tagalog, and
Japanese.
Japanese, that's right. So we have all the languages as well. We try to help with that. The other thing, I guess, I'd like to share a personal experience, and I won't give names, but I've been fighting with a institution. I've written many emails saying that the way that the program that I'm experiencing has been rooted in racism. And, and I've talked about the outcomes of this. and why it's systemic. And the answer I got back from the head was that I've looked at the emails very closely and I don't see any discrimination happening. And I was telling Ellen this morning that I spent 3 hours trying to unpack it and write it and explain it to them. And I found this completely exhausting. And when she talks about reliving the trauma to prove that anti-Asian racism is actually real and it's happening, it is, and this is coming from somebody, I am not would be a complete expert at it, but I've lived it, I've fought it. And for me to write it, it took me hours to write, to try to explain it. And I just felt completely, it was disheartening because again, I was told it's not real, it's not happening. What you feel and what you're experiencing has nothing to do with anti-Asian racism. So I think it's really important that people reach out to each other to talk about this, because you know, we are reliving it over and over and having to explain to people why we feel this way, why the outcome is actually very racist and is rooted in systemic racism. And I think reaching out to people like Project 1907, ourselves, and other experts, and to train ourselves is really important, because it's not easy. It's not easy to talk about, it's not easy to relive, and people really don't want to admit that it exists and that they're not. And if systemic racism was that easy, that you could read a few emails and identify it, it would be easy to address, and it's not. It's a lot of work. So I think we just have a few minutes left. Yeah. So I just want to thank you all for taking the time out to come and listen to our presentation. We really wanted to make it feel like it wasn't academic. It was really about us sharing what we've learned and what work we've done and we're continuing to do, to get feedback from all of you, because I believe that you are all in the space as well, and we can learn from each other, and we should all work together. So thank you, and thank you, National Symposium, for letting us have this space.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Hélène. It was very great presentation and discussion, and thank you everyone for your participations. Also, I don't know if you had the chance to watch the video "Unite Against Anti-Asian Racism" that the Symposium team made, and so presented the Elimin8hate campaign. So if you want, I can put the link in the chat. In the chat, if you're interested to watch it. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I don't know, Hélène or Barbara, if you have other things to say before we left.
I just want to thank the National Symposium of Asian Heritage Festivals. It's been, I know how much work it is to host an event, especially now with this whole pandemic and online. So thank you for bringing us together and allowing us time and space to talk about these important issues.
Yeah, thank you to you for your presentation and talk about the issues too. So we have a lot of commentaries that they said thank you to Hélène and Barbara. So thank you, everyone.